Hello, dear brothers and sisters. Today we will be talking about the famous biblical story of the young man coming to Christ and asking him, what can he do to be perfect? In the story, we see that the young man comes and kneels in front of Christ, asking him, what can he do to be perfect? And he calls Christ good teacher. In this story, we see a beautiful explanation of what we have to do in order to be able to get closer to Christ, get closer to God. We see also what the obstacles may be that will prevent us from getting closer to God and to our salvation. And also the answers and the responses given to the questions of the disciples. When the young man asks Christ, good teacher, what can I do to be perfect? Christ first asks him to keep the commandments. Then after he confirms that this young man has been keeping the commandments from his youth and confirms which ones are most important and what should he keep, then he tells him to go, sell everything, give it to the poor, take his cross and come and follow him. And the story says that the young man leaves very sad because he possessed a lot of things and he was not ready to give them up for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of following Christ. And when he leaves, Christ says that it is very difficult for the rich to be saved because it's almost as if a camel had to go through the eye of the needle. And that makes the disciples worried because then they assume that it is impossible for anyone to be saved. But Christ confirms with them, teaches them that yes, it would be impossible for anyone to be saved if it was by men, if it was only by our efforts, it was only by us trying to get closer to God and God was not responsive or was not loving God who wants us to be saved. And if that's the case, if God is loving and God is the salvation, God is the Savior, then everything is possible, even the salvation of the rich man who did not really respond to the call of Christ at this time in this story. So let's reflect upon a few things in the Gospel reading that we haven't talked about in the past. I remember that I have talked about this story in the past with you. Now, first of all, in the story we don't see that he comes to Christ and says, I am a rich man and I want to be saved. It is after he leaves that we find out that he was a rich man, and that was a reflection of the others. It is given to us as a side note, a footnote by the evangelist saying, and because he possessed many things, he could not give up. That's why he left sad and he did not come to Christ. Now, first of all, we don't know if this young man came back later. It is very possible that he went and pondered upon the reality, the importance of his relationship with Christ, the importance of his perfection, and compared it to what he possessed, or rather what he was possessed by. And he probably desired freedom from these possessions and came back so that the truth will save him, the truth will set him free. We don't know that. But first of all, let's emphasize the fact that this rich man did not recognize himself as a rich man. We know in other parts of the Gospels, for example, when the centurion comes to him, he says to Christ that he has servants and he tells them to go and they go, and he tells them to come and they come. Therefore, he is not worthy that Christ enters under his roof. But he says, if you say only by word, my servant will be healed. And Christ praises his faith. Thus, in the story, we see that the recognition of our condition is a very important aspect, that unless we evaluate correctly where we are, who we are, it is almost impossible to fix the problems that we have in our life. And so in this story, the young man leaves Christ because it was not his idea that he was a rich man. And if we ask a question in the streets, we do a study, if we ask people whether or not they think they are rich, most of the answers we will get will be negative, because people, although they are well taken care of, they have enough for all the needs that they have in daily life, they do not consider themselves rich. There are standards in every human mind of being rich. Someone who has $1 million may not consider himself rich, because there are others who have billions, and that's who are rich in his mind. Although if you compare this person to one who works and makes his living on daily basis, this could be considered a rich person. But that's not the thing. The point is that every single one of us can be recognized as rich depending on our relationship with our possessions. We value and put on the pedestal what we have that makes us rich, because it attaches us to our possessions. Poor is on the other side, is also relative understanding, because most people, although they live day by day, they will not be humble enough to consider and recognize themselves poor, because Christ says, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. Where would this man find the poor to give his wealth to them, unless someone recognizes him or herself as poor, unless someone makes him or herself vulnerable to be on the receiving side. And so being poor or rich is a relative understanding, unless when we look at the reality, in comparison we can say that this person is rich and the other person is poor, based on also what the standards of the society is. A poor person in one society will be considered well off in another society, because in that society we have, for example, people who have not eaten for weeks, or they are eating small portions and that's all they can afford. They have no purchased clothes for themselves for years. They're wearing rags. So that's another standard for poverty, where in a wealthy society where the standards are much higher, poor are considered those perhaps who have debt, or who have lived their entire life day by day and they haven't had the chance to have any savings. So those are different standards that show us that it is very important that we evaluate ourselves. And why is it that Christ wants this man to go and sell everything and give it to the poor? Is it what we possess that obstacles from getting closer to Christ? Is it what we possess that makes it difficult for us to enter into the kingdom of God? Or there is something else? In order to understand this, we need to look at a different story in the New Testament, the story of the 10 maidens. 5 of them were wise maidens and 5 of them were foolish, according to the story. And the wise maidens had enough oil in their lamps, and in the middle of the night they were expecting the coming of the bridegroom. They were standing at the door of a castle and the bridegroom was inside, and they were expecting him to open the doors and come out. While they were expecting this, in the middle of the night, some of them fall asleep. And those were the foolish maidens. And as they were sleeping, their lamps run out of oil. And when the trumpet sounds, that was the sign of the bridegroom coming out, and they had to go and meet him. These 5 foolish ones find out that their lamps had extinguished, they had run out of oil. They immediately asked to the others who still had oil to get some of their oil, but In the story, interestingly enough, the wise maidens who had oil refused to share their oil. Now, looking at this from Christian perspective, some of us may say, why couldn't they share their oil so that everyone together could meet the bridegroom? But the church fathers very wisely explained this story, saying that the oil has the symbolism of mercifulness. In order to gain mercifulness, to practice mercifulness, to train our hearts to be merciful, we need to work ourselves. Someone else cannot make us merciful. And the oil is the oil of gladness, the oil of mercy that comes from exercising our kindness, our love, our care, our compassion towards others. And that's why, therefore, the wise maidens tell the foolish ones, you need to go into the marketplace, and that's where you need to get some oil for your lamps. And the marketplace, again, is a symbolism. It shows the world, that the world is the place where through our relationship with others, we can practice, we can exercise our compassionateness, our love, our care, and our mercifulness towards others. And by being merciful, we are collecting oil into the lamps of our hearts, and our hearts are shining. Christ calls us the light of the world. Unless we have the light burning and shining, we are not able to meet the Lord when He comes. And that light can be burning in our hearts if we practice and exercise our compassion, our mercifulness. And we need to do it so that we have extra oil, we have enough oil, so that just in case we fall asleep, as it shows in the story, we will still have oil, we will have enough until the coming of the Lord. Now, when is the coming of the Lord? How do we know how much oil should we collect and how long should we wait for the coming of the Lord? In this story, Christ was there, and this rich man had the opportunity to address Him, to get closer to Him, to even kneel in front of Him. And God is present, and He was one of the blessed ones who saw what many prophets had desired to see but hadn't. And this rich man was, in a sense, privileged to see, to be born at a time when Christ lived on this planet. And many had been waiting for this to happen, and they hadn't been able to see it. And so also for us who have been born after Christ's coming into the world, who are waiting for His second coming, it is very difficult to identify exactly when and how will that happen. And that is told even by Christ Himself, that He will come as a thief, that we will not know when His coming is. Therefore, we should be ready any time. And that is shown very beautifully in the story of the 10 maidens. They don't know when Christ is coming, when the bridegroom is coming. And because they don't know, and they are waiting, and the unknownness brings them to the state of asleep, of tiredness, and of discouragement. And in that discouragement, as they live their life discouraged and tired, they fall asleep. In other words, they waste their life. It is not the physical sleep that is considered here in the story, it is the spiritual sleep. It is the wastefulness of our life, when we do not do anything that is gaining us that valuable oil of mercy that is considered as a sleep. So for us who are waiting for the coming of Christ again, it is very important to be on our task. As a watch person who stands on a tower and watches the enemy, or watches the thieves not to come and destroy the castle, we also have to guard our castles. We have to guard our city, which is our own life, our own soul, so that we are ready anytime. Jokingly, sometimes I tell parishioners who come for Bible study that it is necessary that we are in a prayer state all the time, even when we are standing at the stoplight, because that's the time perhaps Christ could come for us. And how does that happen? Sometimes when we say the coming of Christ, we imagine the universal, the global second coming, the end times. And sometimes we mistakenly waste our life because we know that historically Christ hasn't come for so many centuries. What is the chance that He will come in our lifetime? But as once one of my dear friends told me, the end of my life is the second coming for me, because that's the chance that is given to me in this life. And once I am not alive anymore, it doesn't matter how long it will take until Christ comes again. In order to understand why is this true, is because when we are living in this world, that is the chance given to us, as it is shown in the story of the maidens, that we are living in the marketplace, we are living in the world, and that's where we gain the oil, that's where we gain the substance that will keep our light burning. But if we waste that and we fall asleep while we were supposed to be living our lives, we're supposed to be watchful and prayerful, then at the end of our life, as we fall asleep, really, in a Christian terminology, falling asleep, as the church fathers say, is equal to sleeping. And as we don't know how long we have slept when we fall asleep, we sleep at night and we wake up in the morning and we don't know how many hours have we been sleeping until we look at the clock. Also, when we die, the time changes its reality. And the second coming to those who have passed away may seem seconds after they have died. It doesn't matter if you have been dead 1,000 years and Christ comes after 1,000 years, that may still seem a few seconds, because like in regular sleep, we lose track of time when we sleep in the Lord, when we die. So the actual chance for us is here in this world, now and here. And the beginning of the coming of Christ is the end of our life. And in the Gospels, we have another beautiful story explaining to us how we should live our life. And that is a story of another rich man. The rich man had farms and fields. And this particular year, the fields brought much more fruit than during prior years. And his servants come and report to him, saying that your fields have brought more fruits this year. What should we do? Because there is no room in the barns. We have filled all the space, and now we have more fruit. And he says, I will destroy my barns, and I will build bigger ones. And I will eat and drink and be merry, and I will not be worried about anything for the next year, or maybe 2 years or 3 years. So he's planning ahead. He's relaxing his life for the future. And in a sense, we can say that he's hoping to fall asleep spiritually, because that now he doesn't have to worry about anything. He doesn't have to struggle day by day. He has enough and he's taken care of. And at that time, when he is so relaxed and assuming that he doesn't have to do anything anymore, the angel appears to him and says, foolish man, I will be coming for your soul tonight. I will be asking for your soul. I will be taking your soul tonight. So all you have is this day. You have no more than a day. And all you have collected from your farms and from your fields, you are not going to enjoy because of your attitude towards it. And therefore, Christ is teaching us that we are to share what we have. And that's how we gain and multiply the oil of our heart that will burn and will keep us awake to guard and to watch for the coming of the bridegroom, as the wise maidens were watching. And they entered with the bridegroom into the castle, as the other ones who had gone into the world, into the marketplace to get more, they were delayed and the door was closed for them. And therefore, in all these stories, we find that mercifulness is the central image in the story of the rich man, that Christ wants him to go and gain oil by sharing what he has. Now, some of us will say, well, according to our standards, we are poor, we are not rich. Therefore, we don't have to do anything. We already have nothing. And our church fathers look at that and advise us that sharing, giving, or living compassionate life and doing acts of mercy is not reserved only for the rich who have extra. In fact, he looks at people who were giving to the temple and he evaluates who gives how much, and he pays attention to the old lady who gave only a penny, and he says that she gave more than the rich person who gave 1,000 times more out of what he didn't need. But this woman gave everything that she had. And therefore, the amount that we give is not necessarily determining the quality of our gift. It is the kindness of heart. It is our desire and our dedication that makes the gift valuable. And giving a cup of water to a hungry, homeless person has more value than the millions of dollars that we give out of our extra that we have in the bank sitting somewhere we don't even use. Sharing the stuff that you need for your basic needs with others, that makes absolute valuable gift. It can be 5 minutes of your time in a busy day of your life to share with someone, to hear their story, to hear their sadness, to give them a small advice. It can be, as I said, a glass of water, half of your lunch, sharing with your brother who has none. And those are the things that Christ is looking for. First, in this case, the rich man had so much, he asks him to give everything away. So that is a way of perfection, because that's what the young man asks from Christ. What can I do to be perfect? But he doesn't ask from every one of us to be perfect. He asks from every one of us to do at least something, to start somewhere, to share a glass of water, and then the next day and the next day advance and grow, as in the world everybody strives to do more or to gain more. Christ is asking us to start small and share more every day and gain more of the oil in our hearts, gain compassionate heart, to prepare our hearts for His dwelling. And so when He comes, He will find us ready to serve Him, and He will praise us, and He will call us good servant who has done what he is supposed to do, instead of finding us asleep and closing the door and us being outside of the door and crying to Him and not being recognized. So, dear brothers and sisters, this concludes today's conversation, today's topic of the rich man. Let us look at ourselves from the perspective of this rich man. Let us try to be perfect in our spiritual life. Let us try to establish a beautiful relationship with God and with our brothers and sisters. Let us share what we have with our brothers and sisters, because by giving to them, we are giving to God. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.